It's great to have you all here in our relatively new auditorium. I'm Mark Robbins. I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture. For those who are students, and for those who are students, I'm still the Dean of the School of Architecture. This is a fantastic event. It really brings together a cross-section of people within the university and also in the community. And so it's really been a hallmark of our programming this year, and we hope for years going forward. Before I sort of frame the competition and some of the outcomes of the competition, I wanted to recognize, in fact, what a collaborative process this has been. It's pretty remarkable to get a School of Architecture working with a housing provider like Home Headquarters. So I want to thank Kerry Quaglia. It's right up here, Kerry. You want to just raise your hand? And actually, Kerry comes by this quite honestly. He has a degree in planning from Penn and also a law degree from Syracuse University. And Ed Bogucz, our great and good colleague from the Center of Excellence, who's been working on his own project, the Center of Excellence, the first portion of which you see completed just behind us next to Link Hall, and the larger, the mothership, which will be completed very soon. When is it done, Ed? And so I'd like to thank Ed Bogucz. And also Marilyn Higgins, who I think is delayed in traffic. But Marilyn has had the challenge of roping together all of these entities and working between the university and the city and the community on projects in the Near West Side, as well as the connective corridor. So she's been remarkably valuable, and I thank her. Locally within the school, Julia Czerniak, who's the director of UPSTATE, has done a miraculous job working with Jake Brown. Where's Jake? Who's done just about everything from picking up chocolate almonds to organizing blurbs on the winning competition entries, and also Joe Cisco, who's been very helpful in the exhibition that you'll see downstairs. The exhibition committee has also been valuable here in the school. Marissa Tyrone, and also Jean-Francois Bedard, and many, many, many students have worked to make this project a reality. And now if I can make the technology work, which is always a kind of hit or miss situation. This is why we need a center of excellence, so that we can do slide presentations. Thank you. So I start with this slide because it to me symbolizes something which is kind of critical in the design process. And it's to begin to think about, thanks Julia, think about the way things work rather than obsessing on the way things look. And this is actually a pointer, and it was designed by students at ArchiWorks, an interdisciplinary design school in Chicago. And this is actually for use by people who don't have the use of their hands. But it in fact functions the way a hand does, and it enables a kind of functioning that would be impossible without it. And this seems to me the strength of good design. It actually makes us able to do things that we perhaps weren't able to do. And whether this extends to architecture, in this you're looking at the Pittsburgh Children's Museum, in which there was a complex which was meant to be now a campus for children on the devastated north side of Pittsburgh. Koenig and Eisenberg designed that bright building in the center to link two pre-existing structures into one entire campus. Or this, within a very old school, the Robin Hood Foundation has endowed a series of 30 new libraries to be built within schools. And this was designed by Weiss Manfredi, built for not very much money at all. And they designed everything from the bookshelves to these rolling caster-like cushions that really allow children access to an environment that's about play, but about independent creative play, and also about books and learning. I was recruiting for the School of Architecture, as I do quite a lot in the fall semester, and I was down in Dallas, and I visited the Booker T. Washington Arts Magnet High School. This is one of the oldest African-American high schools in the country. The original building dates from 1924, but they ran a competition, and Brad Clopeville won this competition. And so what you're seeing is the old building here from 1924, the connector piece, and the addition. And what's wonderful about the school is that it highlights the creativity of the students inside, so that as you're crossing through these oversized hallways during 7th period or 8th period, you can watch students taking their ballet classes in through this glass. Art students can sit and draw Degas-like, looking at the activities of the school. The outside of the building functions this way as well, so the community can be invited in, and actually the doors of the school, which are full height, open up to a stage so that when the children perform, all of their parents can come. And this is a wonderful model, it seems, for the ways that architecture can reread, program, and insert itself at every level and every scale within the city. In our own city, a building that had been seen as an eyesore, the Duncan Bright building, which many of you are intimately familiar with. In this configuration, it served Syracuse University, both for community-based programs, for the School of Architecture, as well as for visual and performing arts. And this, faces out onto Fayette Street, one of the most crowded access points, leaving the city, so that people are always aware that something is going on downtown. It truly becomes a beacon for Armory Square, for the city of Syracuse, but clearly becomes a threshold for the near West Side, which is near and dear to the people sitting in the front row especially. This is our project site. And so the near West Side itself embodies a microcosm of what we find in post-industrial cities. We look and see former light industrial properties. We see lots of surface parking lots. We see empty buildings, but we also see a still vibrant community, though it's missing many of its houses. And so the challenge is to think about the complexity of the situation, and think about the ways that cultural institutions can be brought together with residences, which can be brought together with landscape. And here we see a proposal for CNY done by Koning Eisenberg, and a kind of master planning idea for the near West Side, just along West Street. And this sits right against the area which we call the Horseshoe, which is about 200 properties with many different kinds of housing stock. And the competition entries, which you'll see downstairs and later on today during the presentation, are meant to go in those empty lots. And so Case Supply, which is one of the larger footprint buildings, is about 220,000 square feet. There have been many, many ideas. Some of them have to do with using local food culture as a spur for economic revitalization. This is an image done by students at the School of Architecture with Brad Lynch. Or this, another project which will in fact be done by Brennan, Sewell, and Lynch of Chicago for the Lincoln Supply Warehouse. And we see the green screen as an icon for a neighborhood which has now been dubbed SALT, which is a reference to Syracuse's history in producing salt, but also talks about the unity of lifelong learning, about design, arts, and education within this neighborhood. Similarly, students have begun to think in more profound ways about sustainability. This was a project done with students as this is Rachel Kenny's project, in a class about the ways in which renovations can be done in a more sustainable, technologically advanced way. And this is meant also to feed in to the larger notion of what we can do on the west side through a CAR-T grant, through Ed Bogucz, the College of Engineering. Tim Stenson has worked on proposing energy-efficient houses that would go on the west side. Or this, the Info Center by Lubrano Ciavara, which we hope to be really a center or a hub for the kind of activity that'll happen on the near west side. And this is a proposal, and this project will be going forward as well, we hope, in the near future. But that brings us to the competition, and I won't say very much more about this because you will see all of the kind of remarkable, challenging work that our designers have done. The notion was to see if we could bring together affordability with newer technologies and also think about the ways in which we could approach the complexity of the post-industrial city and dealing with the rough edges of a city like Syracuse. And rather than proposing, as so often is, a kind of fiction under glass, we wanted to get some of the best designers, and we got them with ARO, Della Valle Bernheimer, Cook and Fox, and Onion Flats, coming up to look at our context because we don't look like an Italian hill town, nor do we have a Grand Canal running through it. This is our neighborhood. This is us, and it's very multiple. We have buildings that look very, very different. We have people that look very, very different. It's an authentic mix, and it's this kind of vibrance that we hope to maintain when we begin to do those additions. Of course, we all love these wonderful little Victorian houses, and there are all levels of proficiency in making a bid to historic architecture in the neighborhood. Some successful, some less successful, but the point here is that the vision of the West Side is multiple. We will continue to have Italianate houses and Victorian houses, and we will continue to have houses by Christopher communities and by home headquarters and by habitat. But we will want to think about maintaining densities within the neighborhood, maintaining the adjacencies which are so critical. So trying not to fuse lots, but to make smaller houses on smaller lots that give us more people moving in and around this neighborhood. So that when Syracuse builds, it builds in an intelligent way. It builds in a way that becomes a model for the future. And I'll leave you just with this. Just in the past 5 days or so, there have been articles about this housing competition that have shown up in papers in Milan and in New York City and in Syracuse. This was an article that appeared last spring, and it had the kind of rhetorical question, can architecture save Syracuse? And as much as I would like to say as a Dean of School of Architecture a resounding yes, we know that the answer is much, much more complex. What I hope is that we all leave today thinking about the ways that each one of us can participate in changing our cities and making them better. Thanks all for coming. I guess I should have clapped for me. I'd like to turn over the stage to a series of our partners to ask them to talk a little bit about their participation in this project. I would like to mention, though, that the project, in addition to the partnerships, represents funding through the Community Foundation and also through the Community Preservation Corporation. So thank you very, very much. I'd like to turn the stage over to Kerry Quaglia. Thank you, Kerry.
Maybe just a couple of words to begin with on Home Headquarters. Home Headquarters is a private not-for-profit. We're affiliated both with the NeighborWorks Network, and we're a member of the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation Network, as well as the Enterprise Foundation Network. And our mission is neighborhood revitalization through home ownership. And we really do that in three ways. And the first way is through a variety of lending products that seek to provide home improvement loans for folks that maybe can't get their properties fixed up through conventional means, through banks and credit unions. And then we also have a real estate component that seeks to take distressed properties like HUD foreclosures, city tax delinquent properties, properties that are really not contributing to our community in any productive way, and turning them around and putting them in the hands of owner-occupants who will care for their neighborhoods. And then finally, we have a variety of housing services like pre-purchase counseling, post-purchase counseling, foreclosure intervention that really help make those other efforts very successful. And to date, we've renovated or constructed more than 2,000 properties in the city of Syracuse and beyond for owner-occupants. Each year, we would do about 200 properties to give you some sense of scale. Now, many of those properties are affordable. But more recently, we've been also turning to market rate properties, principally in transitional or distressed neighborhoods, because we believe that healthy neighborhoods have a mixture of income levels. Home Headquarters' role with the Near West Side Initiative has really been to spearhead the residential component of the initiative. The neighborhood strategy was really to connect the commercial properties that were being renovated between West Street and Wyoming with Blodgett School and Skiddy Park. It's really nothing more than asset-based community development, connecting those assets. And in between those neighborhood assets, we had many residential properties that needed some tender loving care. Alice Mann is here. Maybe you could raise your hand, Alice. Alice has been the principal architect of our neighborhood revitalization strategy in this neighborhood. And maybe calling her an architect is not appropriate in this setting, but that's okay. Right. And really, when you're approaching a neighborhood revitalization plan, the first thing that you've got to do is gain control of the properties. And at this point, we now own, Home Headquarters owns 71 properties in that area that we call the Horseshoe. Mike Hughes, who's also here with us today, is going to be handling most of the specs for the properties that would be renovated. And it's pretty much an even match of new construction and houses that will be renovated. But we haven't forgotten about the existing owner-occupants in that neighborhood, and we've provided a variety of programs to assist those owner-occupants, such as mini grants, maybe give the house a fresh coat of paint or repair the porch. And then working with the Center of Excellence, we've also provided these folks with assistance for energy conservation, doing energy audits on their homes and making those homes more efficient. Once these properties are done, both the new construction and the rehabilitation, they'll be marketed really to a combination of families and also artists. And rather than try to prescribe this, we're going to let the market play out and see how that works. We were extremely excited right from the beginning to participate in this design competition, and now we're really anxious to go to the next phase, which would probably be to contract with the architects in question. We committed early on that whoever won, that Home Headquarters would actually build the properties. I think one of the architectural digests said they will actually build the damn things, and that's what we intend to do. In an attempt to control the costs and really improve the quality of construction, we've developed our own construction crew, and that's overseen by Dan Wright. Dan, maybe you could put your hand in the air. He's pretty shy, so I'll probably never convince him to do that. We've never found anything that Dan can't build, so I'm sure this would be no exception. We have a core crew of 3, and Dan is also training a couple of apprentices, construction apprentices right now. And that's really a component that we'd like to do more of, particularly as we're going into some new technologies, some new designs, some new building materials. We'd like to employ more folks from the neighborhood sort of getting in on the ground floor of this cutting-edge technology. With that, I just want to say we're extremely excited to go forward. And I know Mark told me that there were some folks in from out of town today, and if you hadn't seen Mark Robbins in a while, you notice that he's sporting a little bit of a beard, and I don't know, I heard an ugly rumor on campus that he's not shaving until we have these 3 houses built and developed. That, for all of us, should be incentive enough to get these done. Thank you. And it's now my distinct pleasure to introduce Ed Bogucz, who has really helped Home Headquarters get to the next level in new green technology and building sciences. So thanks, Ed. Thanks.
So my name is Ed Bogucz. I lead the Syracuse Center of Excellence, which is an audacious enterprise that involves more than 200 firms, organizations, and institutions. This is a collaborative effort that goes back 12 years of folks coming together around the idea of creating innovations to improve urban environments and built environments. Our partners focus on innovations in 3 areas: in energy, in indoor environmental quality, and in water resources. And it's been really a privilege and a thrill to be involved in this project, and especially in the near West Side neighborhood. At a high level, our mission is about promoting sustainability in the urban communities. The city of Syracuse was born in the near West Side, on the west bank of Onondaga Creek, by the first non-native settlers. And of course, this entire region is a sacred region to the indigenous peoples of the region. So as we think about the near West Side neighborhood, we look at a region that was a vibrant urban neighborhood for 100 years, from 1840 to 1940, 1945. And the history of the neighborhood over the last 60 years demonstrates really the failed policies of the country in promoting sprawl to suburban areas. The vacancies that we see in this neighborhood are the consequence of people leaving the urban core and moving to the suburbs, and then people not moving into the community. So this is a very basic sustainability challenge for this city and for the country. So as we come to this competition, we look for innovations in design and innovations in technology that will demonstrate the attractiveness of returning to the urban core, which is the sustainability solution for the country for the future. When we met with the teams that were invited to do these designs, I stood in front of them and I said, I want to make this bold statement. I want somebody to talk me down. And nobody did. And that is that the birthplace of sustainability thinking in North America is the shore of Onondaga Lake. And it's the founding of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy in 1142, when the guiding principles for that community were the leaders had to think of the impact of their decision on the 7th generation in the future. And I challenged the teams to think about that idea of the 7th generation in the future and what it meant in their designs. And I'm really thrilled with the quality of the technologies that are included in the designs. We look forward to working with Home Headquarters and the other partners in the competition to realize the broad diversity of approaches that are in these winning approaches. So it really is a thrill to be involved in this process. It brings to life one of the dreams of this enterprise that's known as the Syracuse Center of Excellence. And now it's my privilege to introduce V. Gonzalez, who wears multiple hats. B is a Dean of University College and President of the Syracuse City Common Council. But most important, B is a native of the near West Side. She grew up on Gifford Street, and her parents and grandparents were throughout the neighborhood. And so I introduced the native of the near West Side, V. Gonzalez.
Good afternoon. You want me to use? I'll use this. Good afternoon, everyone. I have to look at my notes, otherwise I'll ramble. I was really pleasantly surprised with my experience as a juror, and I was really happy that I was asked to participate, because I don't really know that much about house building other than I live in a house that was built in 1845, and my husband is constantly doing something to it. But when Mark approached me about being on this jury, I was absolutely fascinated, because for many years now we've been talking about workforce housing in the Near West Side. We've been talking about tying those community assets in a way that makes sense. One of my colleagues on the jury is Carol Horan. Carol is here. She also lives in the neighborhood, and Carol worked in that neighborhood. And Carol, I'm going to use her words today because her words were really important as we went through this process. As we were talking about these houses, right, as we're standing with these super creative people who are walking us through their designs, Carol was the one that would kind of keep them honest and say things like, how's the snow going to melt off that roof? And why? Well, that house doesn't really seem like it feels like it belongs in our neighborhood. It's not a welcoming kind of house. But, you know, the architects that designed, they spent time in that neighborhood, and in their conversations with us, they talked back to us what they saw as they were in the neighborhood and preparing for this competition. And they saw the assets in that community in a way that even we don't see them ourselves, those of us that live here and work in those communities and travel those communities every day. And we had to kind of go and look at that neighborhood through the eyes of the designers and the architects, because they put ideas in front of us that we didn't think fit. But after we went and looked, guess what? They all fit. And Carol is the one on her way home. We spent all day Thursday looking at these designs, and on the way home on Thursday, she wanted to make sure that there were different kinds of houses in her neighborhood. And how many flat roof houses do we really have on the Near West Side, right? Because we didn't think there were that many, but guess what? There are more than we realized. And that's because we had really stopped looking at our neighborhood in a way that was critical, but also in a way that was respectful. And the designers that came in to do this work, they did that for us, and they brought that back to us. And for that, I want to say thank you, because it was quite an experience. So, I do. It was... and then I learned a lot. You know, if you're not learning, you're not living, right? And that day, those 2 days, I learned a lot. I learned about net zero, and I learned about passive houses. And I was like, how can you really have a house in Syracuse, New York, that doesn't have a heating system in it? Well, they convinced me that that could happen. But what they also did was they talked about these homes as being part of economic development in our community, about being part of workforce development in our community. They really talked about these homes as contributing to the fabric of our city in all aspects. It's not just about building a house. And that was pretty exciting to be a part of that. You know, unlike you, I don't spend much time with architects, so I had a really good time learning about that. So then I get excited, right, and I go tell everybody I know about what I've been doing, and everyone I talked to about those houses. I had the fortune of seeing the deputy chief of police the very day, on Thursday, and I said, Frank, you have to see these houses that we were looking at today, and we're going to build 3 of these houses on the Near West Side. And I started to talk to him about it, and he goes, really? He goes, I want to see these houses. So couldn't you imagine what would happen to the Near West Side neighborhood if some of our police officers chose to live in that neighborhood because of the design and the excitement that these houses bring to where they want to live? Then the other day we had a neighborhood meeting at Shawnee Street Boys and Girls Clubs, and the designs were up on the wall. And Blodgett, which is a huge community asset that's been in the news a lot lately, that we're trying to save, I'll just leave it at that. Because there's too many opinions about how we're going to save it, but we're going to figure out how to save it. But, you know, the people that are in town working with our school district for multiple years, who've been staying at the Genesee Inn, looked at those designs and said, you know, if I'm going to be working in this city for the next 3 years, why wouldn't I want to buy one of these houses and live in one of these houses? This is exactly what this competition is supposed to do. This competition is supposed to make this neighborhood vibrant, make us see this neighborhood through eyes that give us the vision that we lost for this neighborhood. And also, for the people who live there, a new place to live, but bring in new people to the community. What more could you ask for? We're excited. I'm with Mark. I'll tell you what, you don't shave, and I will shave, all right? I'll do a baldy and we'll build these houses. There we go. It was great fun. I can't wait. Our city deserves this. The Near West Side deserves this. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Bea. Okay, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Julia Czerniak, an associate professor here in the School of Architecture and the director of its design center upstate. And although I'm sure that most of you have looked at the 7 provocative housing proposals in the gallery below us for a catalytic infill site on the Near West Side, I'm going to briefly highlight some of their features to both illustrate their variety and set the stage for both the winning team presentations that will follow and our panel discussion later on. Each scheme advances contemporary and creative approaches to energy and cost efficiency and neighborhood context and contributes to an ongoing international and disciplinary dialogue regarding the use of the single-family house as a testing ground for design innovation. The Adjay Associates team proposes the asymmetric house, whose form is based on the transformation of a gabled structure typical of many single-family dwellings. It departs from this conventional form, however, by advancing a monolithic structural system and a lighting strategy that directs daylight from a continuous skylight at the building's ridge line to all parts of the house's open spaces. The team refers to the house as, and I'm quoting, a hot coal in the snow, end quote, an analog and metaphor for the house's thermal performance, which is based on thick exterior walls and wrapped by a shell of clay tiles. It also proposes the use of an underground heat exchange system that works with the Earth's ambient temperature to provide heat during the winter and cooling during the summer. Inside, the concrete slab floor provides a robust surface for everyday life, and continuous glazing at the rear and front entries provides a strong relationship to the street and to the backyard. The Erdy McHenry and Tim Stenson team's proposal is a creative response to their identified need to design what they call 2 houses in 1, as a way to manage the environmental challenge of both hot August days and cool February ones in our climate. To that end, their luminaire house is what they term a machine for living. In the warmer months, the house opens, flower-like they say, to filter sunlight and accept the free flow of fresh air. For the cold gray winter, it closes. The interior living spaces of the house are protected and insulated by thermal buffer zones. Though closed down, the interior of the house glows with diffuse daylight through the multiple layers of greenhouse closure. Through this focus on weather-driven performance, operating costs, and an ambition to have the house form reflect its performance, Luminaire House aims to produce comfort, reduce consumption, save money, and important to the designers, tell its story. To this end, the Luminaire House makes no pretense about blending in, at least in your immediate reading. Alternatively, the designers suggest a strategy that introduces a conspicuous, and I'm quoting them now, a conspicuous, positive yet critical complement to the Near West Side, end quote, all the while complementing the housing fabric of the neighborhood. Finally, their project strategy contributes, they suggest, to the landscape of the city. The front yard is designed to receive a birch tree bosque that, together with a green roof and rear yard cisterns, process all stormwater on site. Something we all know from the area that's important given our city's overly taxed CSO system. The scheme by Office Da and Studio Hima addresses what the team identified as the most pressing concern of the competition: the ability to build a green single-family house for the allotted budget. For this reason, their proposal argues for what the designers call radical economies that revolve around the planning, massing, and material strategies that make what they say a dumb box smart. And perhaps most radical for some of us, including what Bea was just saying, completely eliminate the need for conventional heating and cooling by the use of a super-insulated building envelope. To this end, the house is planned around some basic principles: a simple foundation and massing, and an interior that is gauged towards flexibility and used by different sized families. The strategy is to minimize construction complexity while eliminating multiple trades, materials, and assembly processes. Thus, the foundation is a slab-on-grade with a structurally insulated wall and roof system. The slab-on-grade minimizes excavation costs while also producing a thermal mass. The SIP wall and roof system, for those who don't know, we'll hear more about this later. SIP is structurally insulated panels. Overcomes the multiple layers that normative construction is encumbered by while creating a thick insulating wall. The roof has a single slope, sort of an exacerbated architectural element that collects the water runoff that's for use later on the site. Beyond these principles, the team worked with a set of varied strategy, attempting to, and I'm quoting them, wring as much architectural benefit out of these few materials without sacrificing their inherent efficiencies. Do It Together's project advances a house whose simple exterior envelope contains spaces of varied proportions, spiraling around a stair core, producing an inherently flexible, energy-efficient house. Opening in the stair core frame vertical and diagonal views between different levels that give a sense of spaciousness, allow penetration of sunlight, and multiply opportunities for social contact. The house is made of thick and thin elements that work together to optimize environmental exchanges. Designed using the Passive House Institute standards, the super-insulated and sealed envelope creates a constant, steady-state environment while carefully designed openings and overhangs opportunistically engage climate swings. What the team calls clip-ons, which are design options and features that vary the basic way the house appears and performs, allows owners to expand the dwelling when it is economically feasible to do so. And one such clip-on sort of radically modifies the image of the house from the street, and that's the rainwater cistern that you see there in blue. So the remaining three schemes are the winning ones, which we'll hear about from their designers shortly. I'm going to just say a few things. The R House by ARO and Della Valle Bernheimer and team, which is cleverly named for its energy performance and the social and economic investment of ownership, i.e. our house, presents what they call an affordable, innovative paradigm for minimal energy consumption embodied in architecture that promises to nurture the spirit and engage the community. The house transforms a typical gabled roof into a simple folded surface that recalls the appearance and scale of neighboring houses, engaging the diversity of the existing housing stock. And in transforming the gabled roof typology, the designer's aim is to provide a vision for the neighborhood that is both familiar and progressive. Like the Do It Togethers, the R House design meets the German Passive House ultra-low energy standard, which utilizes a well-insulated exterior, airtight construction, an efficient heating system, controlled ventilation, and windows that optimize solar gain. The interior is airy and bright, enabled by a two-story space on the south side of the house that is lit by large windows. Additionally, the design's intrinsic flexibility accommodates multiple size, site, and layout variations, increasing its attractiveness to a range of individual owners and lots. The live-work home, designed by a team led by Cook and Fox architects, is what the team calls, quote, a modern response to Syracuse's 21st century concerns as a post-industrial American city, end quote, in that it addresses not simply the challenge of designing a green home, but associated concerns of sustaining livelihoods and the social diversities that make communities such as this. Their house concept provides an efficient, highly adaptable space that can be a home for many household types, as well as a home-based office. It is inherently flexible, simply constructed, and designed to incubate a mix of uses. The designers describe the perforated screen that wraps the facade of the house as bouncing daylight into the house and mimicking the dappled patterns of filtered light through trees. Its large front door folds to create a secure open-air anteroom which engages the sidewalk and the street in the way that front porches do. And finally, TED, and you can ask the team what that actually stands for, which is designed by a team led by Onion Flats, both challenges and supports the project's historic West Side neighborhood. TED was conceived as a prototypical home that could comfortably sit on a variety of lots and yet be unique to each site. Programmatically, it is easily transformable. In terms of performance, the scheme is what the designers refer to as an ultra-efficient, thick-skinned, yet light-filled and spacious powerhouse of contemporary urban dwelling that exudes more energy than it consumes, collects and recycles water, and has the ability to produce food. Most interesting to me, TED was designed so that it could be built in 3 different ways. Stick framing, a common method of construction for single-family homes in the region, modular construction, whose efficiency lies in the construction of multiple dwellings and a more energy-efficient envelope, and lastly, the SIP panels that I mentioned, where insulation properties are superior to any other method of construction. Each method of construction has its own strengths and weaknesses, and this is just one debate that I hope we have together on the panel discussion. So I'd like to move now to introducing the winning teams, or the members that are represented here today, as they each present their house to you. The first will be of Cook and Fox, Rick Cook and Pam Campbell, be followed by Adam Yarinsky of ARO and Jared Della Valle of Della Valle Bernheimer, and then finally by Tim McDonald of Onion Flats and Jose Alminana of Adropogon. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. My name's Rick Cook from Cook plus Fox Architects. Really honored to be here. Thank you for your attention. We were asked to include some of our other work, and Pam Campbell from our office. We were asked to include some of our other work to kind of set a context. This concept of context is really fascinating to architects. So what's the context of us entering this competition? Our most prominent project is a skyscraper in New York City called the Bank of America Tower at 1 Bryant Park. It's the project that you see here in the middle. It's just nearing completion right now. It's the 2nd tallest building in New York, and why it's most known is because it's been credited with being the greenest skyscraper in America under the U.S. Green Building Council rating system, the first LEED Platinum skyscraper, on track to achieve the first LEED Platinum rating. What it's about, though, is that many of us jump to the conclusion that architects are interested in accomplishing projects, or that it's about making a building. And in fact, what gets us up in the morning is the exploration. It's about ideas. It's about advancing a cause. It's about making a difference, maybe, if you could go that far. And so we had the incredible blessing to work on this project, but the story really goes that the project right next to it, 4 Times Square, was the first green skyscraper in America. And we had the blessing of working with the Durst family, who said, take everything that we learned from that project and see how much further you can go on this one. So it's not so much about accomplishing this building that they can rent out and make money, but it's about exploring ideas and advancing a cause. And that's the way I like to think about projects. So these other things that I'll show you really quickly are really about that, and hopefully I'll get quickly to our project, but no promises. So, there was something that you could not do in New York City, and this is the big energy answer. So we have a 5 megawatt cogen facility in the building, a giant gas-fired turbine that produces about 2/3 of the annual energy use on site in the building. Like, why is that a big deal? In New York in particular, and the United States in general, we waste about 2/3 of the energy up the smokestack. We put energy into a plant, we waste about 2/3 directly up, and then we waste about 7% in transmission loss. So by the time we plug in, like we are here, we're using about 27% efficient power. So what's the big deal? We're producing power on site at about 77% efficiency. We eliminate transmission loss, and we capture the waste heat. So the reason I tell you this story is not that, gee, that's neat at One Bryant Park, but it was not legal when we started. It was exploring a technology and pushing ahead, and now it's installed and it's getting operational any day now. So even now, there's problems like, gee, it can't produce all the energy at the peak time, and it produces too much energy in the middle of the night, but a cogen wants to run all the time, so then what do? Then you take applicable technologies, readily available technologies. These are 10 giant ice storage tanks, which are going down the basement. There's 44 of them. So at night, it makes ice. It basically stores up cold at night, which diminishes the peak. And why is that good for other people who don't own the building? We have something called peaker plants. Peaker plants are our dirtiest plants. They come on at peak load. So any big building that can diminish its peak load cuts down on the dirtiest power plants being used. And by storing up cold, you cut your peak load. So I know I'm going fast. The real point I want to make is it had never been done before. And because of a really good client who wanted to make a difference, it kept on pushing forward. Okay. Water retention. In New York City, we have combined storm and sewer. This is a huge problem in many, many, many municipalities. And every time we have any kind of significant rain at all, we mix storm water, which is good water, with sewage water, and we pump sewage directly into our rivers and streams. The most profoundly stupid thing, once I got to it, I just could not believe it. So it doesn't really save any money at all, or it wasn't intended to save any money at all. And we said we're going to hold 100% of the storm water that falls on 2 acres in New York City because we want to contribute 0 to this sewage outfall. No money at all. It was going to be extremely expensive to do, saves no money at all. And by the time we were done, because people found out that it was possible to do this, we got a 25% reduction in our water fees and is now applicable to anybody in New York City. It didn't exist when we started the project. It's because people started out to try to make a difference. This is the one that I never thought as an architect. I went to school here, and I never thought I'd stand up and talk about urinals in front of a crowd. But waterless urinals. One technology change in one building saves 3 million gallons of water. I said, I really can't stand up as a designer and talk about something like this until I really did the math. So we were sitting around before my partner said we can't do it anymore. We used to have those little half-liter water bottles around all the time on the table. So we're saying, how many of these things is it? It's 22 million. So we're like, how do we tell people what 3 million gallons is? 2,929 miles of those little bottles, end to end, in potable water savings from one technology change in one building every single year. Also, not legal in New York City when we started out. Legalized through the project through a pilot program through the Department of Buildings as part of a water conserving issue. Okay, I'm going to go too long, but even with radical energy savings, radical water savings, the story, the real story is health and productivity. Higher quality indoor environment. That's the real story. So radical energy savings saves $3 to $4 million. At the time, the chairman of the Bank of America was checking his BlackBerry if you were talking about $4 million. The world's changed completely since then. But when we talked about recruiting and retaining the highest quality talent, then he was really paying attention. So if we cut the energy in half, saves about $3 to $4 million on the skyscraper. If we raise productivity, 1%, which is 5 minutes in a workday, it's 3 times as much money. So the answer really was in health and productivity. We have an underfloor air distribution system. There's a story here. We talk about all the green and health and productivity and energy savings. And the bank came back to us and said, Bob, Rick, thank you very much for telling the story about underfloor air and health. But the reason we're approving it is something called churn rate. It had nothing to do with what you talked about at all. Not one iota about what you talked about is why we're doing it. We're doing it because we have something called a churn rate. We churn our offices at 10 to 15% annually. And we figured out that it's cheaper to do an underfloor air system over the lifetime of the building, not for all the green stuff. You can say whatever you want, but the truth is that's why we made the decision. Okay, the point being that I'm hammering is that you set out to make a difference. You set out to explore ideas and you learn something in the process. I'm getting to a point, obviously, about our little live, work, home. Historic Front Street is another idea about context. In this particular context, I think there are things that are contextual that might be relevant that aren't necessarily tangible. So this part of Lower Manhattan is what was out in the water. And Manhattan grew in concentric rings. The buildings built over cribbing where ships were actually sunk to make landfill. The sites over here, the yellow sites, there's 11 buildings, 3 new right by the Brooklyn Bridge, which is what you see right here. This was a parking lot from here to here on the street. So this is a different idea about how you work with a rhythm of a street, very specific idea about making a building that sits on a street in a particular way. But also there was a context. I'm a Bible student. I happen to be reading Moby Dick and thinking about whaling and Noah's whale and Melville's whale, and Melville sets Ishmael out from these very streets. So this little whale tail thing that's up there is actually an allusion to the fluke of a whale. This one got built, and you can see our little whale tail on the Brooklyn Bridge in the background, all done with Liberty bonds. And here's another story, that completely heated and cooled from 10 geothermal wells, which go 1,500 feet down into the ground. What did I learn there? It's probably not the answer. The amount of heartache and heartbreak that we put into making the geothermal work relative to other technologies. But if we hadn't done it, I'd be saying 10 geothermal wells here in South Street Seaport are the answer. It protects the historic fabric. It has all the answers. We learned a lot. They're really interesting. But the point is, every project is a learning experience. It's not an end in and of itself to an architect. Okay. This is one of the projects that was down there. Another idea about how context sitting on Peck Slip and alluding to the wood-clad sailing vessels heading out to sea, a building that looks out to sea. And then something that really hits home for me, we're an adoptive family from Cambodia, and we made a decision that we'd only work in places that we could get to and get back from in a day on mass transit, with one exception, which was working in Cambodia at something called the Angkor Hospital for Children. We were asked to help here and set a standard for sustainability when people gave money away to help in the third world. How do you do it in a sustainable way? And I went back to this place right here, the 9-square grid, as the simplest form I could think of to express. And the Khmer culture at its peak was about wise stewardship of an overly abundant resource. So at the center is a rain collection area in a 9-square grid, dealing with context in another way. These are buildings that were designed to shed water, and ours was designed to capture water. At the center was this piece. The Angkor Wat temples are really hydraulic engineering, so we had this water collection device at the center. Connecting with the street, an idea about context, meaning when you're inside, you want to connect with the street, because this is a visitor center for a children's hospital, so you didn't want to feel shut in inside. This is in Siem Reap, and building at night. This is along the tourist path when the tourists are going to the Angkor Wat temples. And now back to the live, work, home. Okay, so I'm trying to do it fast, and I'm speaking quickly at the same time, but I'm trying to get to a point. So now I can't help but talk about house without talking about a personal experience. I am a child of upstate New York. Sorry, Mark, but I can't. It's just true. I lived on a cul-de-sac in upstate New York. I lived the kind of leave it to beaver life. And when we started thinking about designing a house, in this particular context, I had to think about what it meant to me. So I grew up on a cul-de-sac. Within a half an hour, every dad in my household started the car and drove away to something called work. And they came home something called home. And I had this very distinct idea about what work was and what home was. After I got out of this place, I moved to New York City, and we became kind of idealistic urban pioneers, and through something called the Sony May Mortgage Agency and Urban Economic Development Grant, I bought a house in a waterfront community in New York City. And I got there, and all of a sudden, I'm the only person on the whole street who goes away to work in the morning. We have the dancer, the artist, the person who restores Stradivarius instruments. And it just wasn't true at all for me, this model that I had seen. I had a chance after a while, we had a chance to live where I live now, which is this kind of perfect single-family home environment. And again, I'm the only one on the whole street who gets up and goes someplace else for work. They do work at home. I have a rock star, an artist, a person who makes movies, and they do things. The idea of house and work are two totally different things. So what's the point of all that? We decided that in the Near West Side, something that was much more flexible might be a model to test. That this idea of a home and work off someplace else wasn't necessarily a formula to pursue, but we invented this idea of the live-work-home. Pretty self-explanatory. Also, our partner, Bill Browning, is Haudenosaunee by birth, and we were thinking a lot about things that indigenous peoples do to make sustainable places. So what we're looking at over here is what we would call interdependent community. So we don't think it's a stretch to talk about cities and neighborhoods as ecosystems. So what we have over here is an interdependent community, a living environment surrounded by a working environment. The working environment benefits from the housing benefits from the jobs, and they're interdependent. What happens when an interdependent community, one of them goes away, you have a monoculture. A monoculture is therefore susceptible to blight. So what we're dealing with right now is a great series of houses that's been struggling because its partner, its interdependent partner, has gone away. When the Franklin Motor Company went away and then the Carrier Company went away, it lost its jobs, it lost the other half. We were inspired by a Haudenosaunee planting principle called the Three Sisters. And without taking too much time, it's what I grew up calling the Iroquois Confederacy. They planted something called the Three Sisters. They would first plant the sister, the tall sister with the flowing hair, which was corn, and the corn would come up. And then right after that, they'd plant seeds of green bean. They called it the sister cloaked in green, who was dependent on her other sister. And there's the pole bean that would grow up around the corn. And ultimately, they'd plant the sister who chases off after the sun, and that was pumpkin and squash. And the big leaves of the pumpkin and squash would keep moisture in the soil and keep weeds from coming up. In addition, they didn't plant one gene of corn. They planted a biodiverse type of planting so that if a disease came through, they didn't starve to death because they believed in a biodiversity. They just knew it made sense not to be reliant upon one type. So what we thought is if we were going to experiment with putting something in the Near West Side in these empty lots, that the concept of biodiversity, of planting seeds of biodiversity. So if you think, if you plant work, if you plant live work, if you plant home here, that it might have a chance of succeeding. And we don't know, it's kind of an experiment. We don't know which one would take off and which one would grow. So that was our concept behind a very, very flexible house. We still had to design a house. So the idea was urbanistically move the house out to the street wall that aligns with the building next door and make it about the front porch. So move the house to the front, and front porches are something that are incredibly powerful for the street activity. If you ask the U.S. Green Building Council to describe a perfect planned community, they would describe the Near West Side from the 1920s. Where there was work, there was people in the streets, that the street was the urban piazza, the place. So we wanted a house that was very much part of that. As architects, we like to think about other ideas at the same time. So if you look at this and you see this piece here as a remnant of the ghost of the piece that's missing next door, that's good. If you see it as maybe a loading dock to a Tribeca loft, that's good. If you see it as maybe a tongue-in-cheek commentary on the two-car garage that we've seen in suburbia, that's okay too. That these things, it's okay to speak multiple languages or kind of fish for references that might be in your mind. Again, the corn, the squash is there as the planting of the Three Sisters. Okay, the next one. This is the plan of the scheme, and Buckminster Fuller said our beds are empty 2/3 of the time, our living rooms are empty 7/8 of the time, our office buildings are empty 1/2 of the time. It's time we gave this some thought. So that was a little bit of an inspiration about a house that could be extremely flexible. So what we did was really make a service down the long side onto the top of the page, and then a completely flexible loft down below. And what you see here is, again, alluding to the Haudenosaunee longhouse, 7 generations of plan configuration, and we're actually thinking maybe an infinite number. For the sake of time, I'll keep going, and you can all see it downstairs later on. These are units that we hoped could be fabricated off-site, maybe even generate jobs, hopefully locally, learning about green technologies, low VOC chemicals. So much of what we're interested in is making healthy indoor environments. Some of it's not bringing stuff inside that poisons you. This is the view of one of those floating units that you see up there facing out. This is the 2-bedroom configuration, the idea of hearth and home, the kitchen hearth and the warming hearth. Another thought was if you live and work, you could sleep in this and also have your studio here as a well-lit, cross-ventilated working environment, so the kind of live-work configuration. And then even at the end of its cycle, at the beginning of its cycle, we thought it might be interesting to actually be a full work loft. And so we just drew this as a quick kind of small architecture firm or graphics firm, as kind of an incubator business in the near west side also.
So one of the things about that we had to decide early on was the level of on-site versus off-site fabrication. We wanted to take advantage of factory fabrication for, reduction in waste and quality management. So we decided to focus on the main elements of the building as being factory fabricated in the form of SIPS panels. So that's the structure and enclosure, structurally insulated panels. One of the reasons why we didn't take it a step further and really fabricate the whole building off-site was we were coming from a material efficiency point of view, and we figured that if we can do more like a flat pack system, you're not trucking the whole building there. You don't have to deal with the stresses and strains of a structure that would need to be craned into place just the once. You're catering for a one-off scenario, whereas we saw in the area, obviously these houses are going to be here for hundreds of years. One of the advantages of structurally insulated panels, it gives you a really nice airtight, it can give you a really nice airtight building enclosure, which basically reduces the amount of energy loss that you would get through traditional construction with a stick frame house. But one of the things that traditional houses do rely on is the amount of air leakage you get. So they rely on their environmental air quality coming from the natural leakage of a non-airtight construction. So we had to address that with deciding to go with SIPS panels. And the way that's normally done is with a heat recovery ventilator, an HRV, which basically means that you're getting constant ventilation at the correct rate, and you're not losing the energy that you would if you were just allowing the air change to happen naturally and leaking out. In terms of the other systems in the house, we clearly went for underfloor radiant heating. One of the reasons for that was coming from this flexibility. We didn't want to, have a two-bedroom house version, which then you had to rearrange ductwork and time, money, waste of materials in order to make it into a studio. So radiant floor made a lot of sense. The other reason it made a lot of sense was it's a water-based system which could hook up easily to a solar thermal system on the roof. For the solar thermal system, we decided to go with we figured the best, most efficient way of all the systems that we looked at was to go with evacuated solar tubes. They're one of the systems that actually work pretty well in this area with very little sunshine, PVs and not so much. There's a few other technologies that we looked at, and that seemed to give us the most value for money in terms of financial investment and also in terms of material investment and what we're putting out there. The other particular thing about Syracuse, of course, is the lack of daylight, with about half the amount of natural daylight hours in the winter as the national average. So that informs both the amount of window, but also the introduction of this screen around the perimeter of the building. We were given a north-facing site for the competition, which has challenges, particularly when you're focusing on trying to do a front porch and really open up to the street. You wanted to create a place where people actually wanted to sit and be outside, but you're on the north face of a building. So this screen created some sort of sense of enclosure, really making an outdoor room, but also because of the sun angles bouncing light into the porch area in the winter, in the summer, and with the lower sun angle in the winter actually bringing it into the living space. We have glazed areas in the front. This particular screen design we came up with based on trying to bring in a more natural type of daylight rather than a heliostat, which would be just a great big mirror. We thought about dappled light. It was really inspired by the way that sunlight comes through a tree canopy. This was our pattern, but we really thought that the nice thing about the screen was you could make it out of a lot of different materials, you could have different patterns, you could really put your personal identity, whether you're a commercial building or a homeowner, you could display yourself on that front of the building. And that's the winter view.
And for us, the idea that Syracuse has extreme seasons. So you could picture this is the same time as our other view. So one the sunny afternoon, one the winter time. So that something would adapt relative to season too. Without making direct allusions, the Haudenosaunee Longhouse was an extremely adaptable form. And as the family grew or the clan grew and diminished, it could be changed. Got it. So we thought we'd join this competition, design a cool modern beach house, apply it someplace else. We got suckered into the whole near west side thing, got totally wrapped up into the whole near west side thing, and one of the things that happened when we were done, what was kind of interesting, is that we did think that there was places where this could be replicable. Troy, New York, Schenectady, New York, Rochester, New York. There are a whole series of places where these beautiful interdependent communities could use a live-work home. So quick ideas, there's a term called biophilia that's extremely interesting to us, and if you can look it up, it's an extremely important term to us. Places where you feel good that use nature as a way to make human habitation feel good. The idea of planting seeds of biodiversity, we're not saying do 200 of these. We're saying that this is well placed throughout the community, and I think it could help. And that people do see one-story lofts as commercial buildings that exist, the corner deli, and that it's not weird to live in the converted curtain shop down the street. So we thought that why flat roof? Is this a contextual thing? I think it is. If you walk around the community, there are small one-story taxpayers that exist in all these communities, and we're alluding to that and the reuse of those. So thank you for your time. I think I went over, but we're really excited about working on the project. Thank you.
Hi. I'm fascinated after this. I'm Adam Yarinsky. I'm principal of Architecture Research Office, and I'm joined here by one of our collaborators, Della Valle, who's a partner at Della Valle Bernheimer. We're incredibly excited to have participated in the competition and to be here, having the opportunity to present our thoughts and hear about the other project. I need to find out where Rick grew up, because I also grew up in upstate New York on a cul-de-sac. So, in fact, one of the things that worries me about this competition is, having grown up in the Albany area, I feel that I'm being somehow unpatriotic by contributing to the future prosperity of Syracuse. But maybe there's enough to go around. I don't know. We wanted to start by just introducing a little bit of our work. My firm has been in practice for about 15 years. We've done a very wide range of projects, but I'm showing just a few to show the diversity, but also to show that we got our start, as Della Valle Bernheimer did, by doing homes and apartments for individuals. And I think having a sensitivity to creating place and the rhythms of how people use their home and apartment and qualities of light, passage of time, the seasons, are all things that we have thought about for quite a long time. And in fact, one of the things that's always troubled me has been the perception that somehow this is solely available to people who have means because they can afford to pay architects and whatnot. And nothing could be further from the truth. So for us, it's absolutely thrilling to be able to create a project that can embody these qualities and deliver them to an entirely different constituency, but in a way not different at all because we're all people. So these are a couple of images of actually my own house outside of the city, but one in which you'll see parallels to some of the material palette that we propose in our project, but using modest materials, well detailed, I think, orientation and quality of light, very important, and also durability and relationship to a site. And most of our residential projects, really all of them, and as well as our other project, are very much about connecting people to place and to site. This is a home that we did in Telluride, Colorado. Entirely different context, but again, engaging qualities of the site, both through material and form and space and orientation. A house that we did in Martha's Vineyard using wood, but again, interconnection of the house with its site and the qualities of daylight and view intrinsic to the experience of inhabiting this very special place along the water's edge. We've done a series of different institutional projects. We were responsible for the renovation and addition to the School of Architecture at Princeton University. The pre-existing condition is on the top there, and that's the new, most visible part of our renovation. But very much in the institutional work we've done, as in the other projects, we like to think about engaging existing conditions with the new, and to create a new totality, to look at things holistically and to form something that works as an entire composition, not only in and of itself in this case, but also with respect to the surrounding campus context. This sits within a very historic campus. And then for something completely different, we're also the architects of the Armed Forces Recruiting Station in Times Square, which is probably our most visible structure, not far from Bryant, One Bryant Place. But again, this is about how to create a building that participates in an incredibly unusual context and engages qualities of both the identity of the institution, the identity of the place, the qualities of this very unique setting in the heart of our city.
So, like most young practices, we start our work by working with our family. This is for my business partner's absolutely insane parents. I can say that because he's not here. This project is exciting for us actually because it was sort of an early project for us, but also begins to address some of the dilemmas that we found in the West Side, which are really about how do we address issues of context, how do we address issues of perception in contemporary architecture, and the patterns of daily life. Philip Noble referred to this as sort of Bilbao, this sort of suburban Bilbao project. It was intentionally duplicitous. It had to go in front of Landmarks Committee. And the house, it was really just a little tiny addition to the house, which you can see on the left image, which is this old yellow clapboard-sided house. And ours takes the cue, obviously, in terms of the character of the house. It's a physical extrusion of the house with a reveal, but sort of reinterprets what it means pattern-wise and how those things get interpreted into a new contemporary model. The house is wrapped in zinc. What I like about the image on the right is clearly this sort of double-take image where you kind of can't tell what's happening, but it does reflect light in a very different way. And it's an exciting little project, and it's very sort of simple. This is a different sort of scale of project. It's also a house, and I think it's important because it's a sort of small lakefront cottage. At least my Canadian client likes to think that. This project was important for a number of reasons. to a certain extent, it was the start of the second arm of our business, which was a real estate development company. This client has since become my business partner for some larger development projects. So we have a different sort of economic model for the architecture firm, which is both architecture and development. The idea that the testing of architecture through execution is what's most important. How do we build these? How do we put our money where our mouth is? And how do we actually make those things which we promise to make for the budgets that we actually have? So this project is interesting because it's a collaboration. We collaborate very regularly. This was a collaboration with Guy Nordenson. And it was this idea of the tree, lakefront cottage, and sort of small home, and how this idea of trees gets reinterpreted structurally into an invented structural system. You can see this sort of obvious image on the left of tree rings, and our interpretation of this tree as structure, the interior space, which is actually made of a long span plywood structure, which sounds to be a little bit of an oxymoron, but working with Guy, we developed actually this sort of structural volume of space like a tree canopy that opens up in the center of the house. This project is a small garden pavilion. I show this because this is sort of in the same way as the lakefront house. This is about ingenuity. This was built for $12,000. It's a tiny little garden pavilion. The word pavilion comes from papillon, which means butterfly. This sort of transformation of the word butterfly into a pattern of physical butterflies that creates this cocoon-like space. It's this kind of investigative process that our office goes through, this iterative process to find where the best place to start a project is and how that marries technological uses of technology for purposes of fabrication with the sort of romantic idea of contemplative space, and how those shadows and light sort of create a different type of environment, something that's sort of detached from historical precedent. So this project, that we're working on for the West Side was really interesting to us because we had just sort of worked on one and completed one in Brooklyn, which was similar in nature. This is an affordable housing project in East New York. We had 9,000 applications for 9 houses. There's an extraordinary demand. We built these for $108 a square foot in Brooklyn. We can bring that here. I think what's interesting is that there's this really bizarre context of this patchwork of aluminum siding, these sort of Archie Bunker-ish type houses that happen in here, and there's this kind of patchwork. And as the developer, this was our first development project, it was really this idea that, hey, affordable housing requires more thought rather than less. So as a developer, we brought 3 other architecture firms to collaborate with us. Architecture Research Office, Lewis or Markey Lewis, and Briggs Knowles, and we approach this as architects and developers and saying, this is the single largest purchase someone will ever make. It is their first big purchase. We can't make mistakes. And so we developed 2 different sort of zoning contextual characteristics and a material palette that got deployed in a variety of ways. And it was incredibly exciting and rewarding. They're sustainable as one can be in that sort of budget category. Everything is, locally sourced. We worked with the local collaborative workshops to train workforce to build these houses, which proved to be a huge advantage in terms of how little vandalism we actually had during construction, because there was this sort of deep-rooted community respect for the project. Obviously, the houses are built for people. That's the sort of most important thing, and we're unashamed by the sort of strength of the architecture and that people would start to personalize them. Just anecdotally, the sort of really wonderful, warm moment, we had mentioned this when we were interviewing for this, or when we were presenting our competition, people started to put window bar grates and other things on the windows and started to customize and personalize their house, and this was sort of really wonderful. And one of the buyers, their bar grates had these Mercedes symbols sort of welded into the bar grills of the house. It was this really wonderful moment because, you sort of want to cringe at that, but on the other hand, it's this really wonderful compliment that this was just as important. And so this was the sort of start. This was the start of our collaboration together, and the first project that we did together as a team. We've since done 2 others. So quickly, to the projects. Julia did such a good job starting the presentation for us, so we can go a little bit more quickly, perhaps, to through the ideas of the project. I think it goes without saying that today, in thinking about sustainability, it's not just green materials, it's not just energy efficiency, it's this more holistic approach to quality of life, quality of light, and sort of culture of living. Obviously, we want to save energy and make the house more high performance. As you mentioned, we did Passive House, this idea of just pure brute force reduction of energy consumption. The biggest problem with this competition, or the hardest part of the project, is in the development world we refer to it as sort of upside down. The values of the house are less than the value to actually build the house. That's one of the dilemmas, and as a real estate developer, we're sort of incredibly sensitive to how do we create value, how do we make an investment into a neighborhood, and how carefully do we calibrate that. So in thinking about sustainability, economic sustainability was an important point of our project, which we'll discuss. And then lastly, and as I alluded to in the last project for our Glenmore Gardens project, building community. How do we build community, and how does sustainability and community go together? How do these things happen, and how do they sort of gestate?
So, is this on? Yes. So, as Jared said, Julia did a great job of summarizing Passive House. We're very excited about the possibility of shifting the paradigm for this program type single-family house, as well as for other buildings in the United States, toward what has been developed and refined in Germany and elsewhere. Also in the United States, there's a Passive House USA Institute. But it's basically shifting buildings over to a different standard of how they utilize energy. In the case of this project, and we worked with Trans Solar, which has an office in New York but is based in Germany, on the development of this and the testing and modeling to see that we complied with the standard. Basically, we're using about 70% less energy than a comparable house of the same size built in Syracuse. And if we were to add solar thermal or PV, the house could actually be net zero, which in other words, it would be not using any energy off the grid. But the principles are very simple, and the most exciting thing is, I don't want to get into detail about it, but the most exciting thing about it for me in working on this was that all of them work hand in hand with just the qualitative experience of enjoying living in the house. So there's no compromise you have to make, essentially. So the house is extremely well insulated, R50 walls, R60 roof, we have R65 roof, R60 slab, and very airtight, much more airtight than standard.
We addressed this project, this idea of Passive House. What's particularly interesting about Passive House, and we were when doing affordable housing, and especially affordable green housing, this idea of how carefully you, where you choose to spend money, how you prioritize. 73% of our budget is focused on the building envelope. That's really interesting to me because we're investing in something that has no technological shelf life. We're not investing in a new technology. We're investing in a really warm jacket for a house. We refer to this thing like a sheep. You're literally investing in something that can last 50 years. It doesn't matter how sophisticated the boiler is. The windows have to be sophisticated. But the technological aspects of Passive House are interesting because you don't necessarily need to achieve Passive House to sort of live the concept of Passive House. And I think that's an important characteristic of how we would administer the project going forward, which means we establish a goal and then we add it clearly to achieve sort of real life budget constraints that exist within the project. We could put in 1,500 watts worth of electric baseboard heating and have a functioning boiler. A heat recovery system to a certain extent is important and valuable, but the question is how much will we invest in new technology per se? We'll invest in building envelope. This idea of Passive House and investing in the building envelope is also interesting because it turns the idea of green technologies on its head and what a green-collar workforce is. People don't think of carpenters as green-collar workforce, but reinstituting best practices and telling people and teaching people through educational process how you insulate a house, how you create a tight envelope, how you flash the building envelope, or how you achieve this level of insulation and tightness is a carpentry skill set that turns it into a green-collar workforce. It doesn't require different levels of education. It requires straightforward training. So that's an idea that we can take an existing community, an existing workforce, and reinstitute a very simple sort of skill set or deploy a new simple skill set in how we would actually go about building these things. So the basic formal proposition of the house, I'll skip past this. This is just quickly the building envelope. You can see the building technology. What's interesting is that it's just a straightforward 2x6 wood frame construction house with EPS foam on the exterior of the house, creating this super thick wall assembly. There's insulation under slab. The interior floor is a lock deck construction, which is we chose for material qualities, but the building envelope technology is really something straightforward. So how did we arrive at this house? It wasn't our goal, and you'll see later we have literally thousands of models of the house that we built, to sort of transform the typical gabled roof into this house. But what we found are sometimes the simplest things, or the simplest responses historically, are accurate for a reason. They are efficient. And so we transformed the existing gabled roof, and what we found in the twisting and the transformation of it is that you create massive amounts of efficiency in the planning. You create 2 high spots in the ridge, which become occupiable room spaces inside. And then the arrows that you see on the form on the right, we start to actually amputate parts of the building envelope which become inefficient or which are unnecessary. The overall house is only 1,200 square feet. It's a very straightforward house, obviously. Just living space, optional room. Upstairs is 2 bedrooms, stacked bathrooms. And the opportunity is to, in the future, add a vestibule here and create this into a 2-family house. And if you needed a 4-family house, you could simply fill in the void, which is the double height space. Another idea of long-term sustainability, which is sort of adaptive reuse of an existing structure, and therefore the investment in the envelope goes a long way. 30, 40 years, empty nesters, 2-family houses, etc.
I'm going to fly through this. We thought a lot about the character of the house and the neighborhood. I wanted to respect the street edge, have all of the drainage on the site contained within it, use the cut from making the excavation for the house to create a berm on the back of the house, which helps to enclose space and create a little bit more privacy as well. We thought a lot about, these are photographs that Jared took in the neighborhood when we did the walkthrough, and thought a lot about the textural qualities of the different materials in the neighborhood, and feel very strongly, although we're proposing this sort of finely corrugated aluminum, which is economical as well as durable, there are other possibilities and ways of engaging in a material palette that could be quite beautiful and speak to the diversity of building stock and materials in the neighborhood. On the interior, these are a few views just taking you inside, making use of whitewashed plywood, exposed polished concrete floor slab, lock deck, which is a structural spanning wood decking for the second floor, and then we use polycarbonate as a material to bring, sometimes it's as a kind of detail, in this case the handrail at the stair, and sometimes it's as a way of borrowing daylight from one space to the other, so it forms the partition between the master bedroom and bedroom on the second floor and this 2-story space. Very important to the interior is, as compact as the exterior is, we wanted to emphasize the sense of openness and connection to the exterior, which is very challenging to do in a cold climate. You know, we're not in Southern California here, so this is a way of strategically locating windows. You're always getting a glimpse from one space to the other. Things feel more open, especially, again, in a place where cold climate, you may be indoors a long part of during a long winter. This is a view from the stair looking down to the backyard, out toward that area. And we felt very important. One of the great things about why we chose a more compact form is that when you own your own property, you have this possibility of having a yard, which is your place to actually do a variety of different things. You can garden, you can go skating, you'll see in a minute, and all manner of things. And so it was very important to us that that be something which became a palette and a possible way of a person occupying the site. This image you already saw, and then this view again from the back.
I spoke briefly about economic variability and community. I think Rick said it right, which is variety is important. Family structure variety, prototypes for different types of building housing, for different housing, where it's 2-bedroom or 2-family or multifamily housing, etc., is really important. And this investment that we're making into the project, where we're making a conscious decision that we're investing to a certain extent more than the value of the actual houses, and how we can make that investment last as long as we possibly can. You want to go to the next. We believe that there's obviously this requirement for variety. We think the strength of the form of our proposal can help knit together the community along with the other proposals. I think variety of color and texture, as Adam was referring to, and occupancy, how people begin to take control of front yards or rear yards, and how they begin to decorate their houses and actually build community over time, helps to build a sensibility about sustainability. I think you can see we've spent a little bit of time thinking about this, and I think we're really excited about what it means to invest the time and how we get this done. These projects require massive amounts of endurance. Speaking from experience and especially looking ahead at the mess that is the current economic climate, I think there is no better time than now to invest the time. Cities like Syracuse are really prime to have growth that varies significantly or outpaces the growth of major metropolitan cities because of the opportunities that they present for adaptive reuse, for retraining of workforce, and frankly just brute force eagerness to sort of survive, and how people can reconsider, and they can be much more nimble and flexible in times like this. So we're very excited about that.
Where's the pointer? Right there. Okay, good evening. We're last, and so we get the fewest minutes to speak. So so we'll move quickly through here. Jose Alminana from Adropogon, Tim McDonald, one of the partners of Onion Flats. Our whole office came up today. Howard Steinberg.
Get up, guys. Get up.
My partner.
Get up.
My partner and brother. My partner and brother Pat McDonald. He and I started Onion Flats about 10, 11 years ago. What I want to say quickly is that we are architects, developers, and builders in general, which means that we started out our practice by thinking basically that the sustainability of the profession of architecture itself relied on architects returning to their art of building. So we have built all of our own work, literally ourselves. And my brother Patrick's a master plumber. We've done every thing from, I've put in, I'll never do tile again. I've put in more tile in my life than I care to remember. But it's a fundamental dimension of our company and our approach to architecture, because we've become acutely aware of the relationship between one's ideas and the cost of one's ideas, and how financing is actually, and money is actually, a tool to hone one's ideas rather than to discover halfway through the design process that that you're over budget and you need to cut out the idea. So that is why we jumped on this competition, because this competition was about, you can't imagine, if you've read the brief, I don't know how many times it was stated, this is not like other competitions. We're going to build this. You must build it for $150,000. Get it? That's what we're about. Second portion of that is what we're also ultimately about, is demonstrating the idea that sustainability is inherently affordable, because sustainability is inherently common sense, and yet to say that and to demonstrate it are two different things. So what our practice is about is basically proving to ourselves and to other people that you will not, in a short amount of time, be able to not generate power. Buildings will not be consuming power, they will be generating power. And it will cost the same to build those types of buildings as it costs to build unsustainable buildings. So that's the context within which we started this and got excited about this. We want to show you very quickly some of the ways in which we've approached we're from Philadelphia. And Philly is an amazing city. We believe this issue of context, I think, keeps coming up, and in lots of really interesting ways. The way we've addressed context in our previous projects is really we've been discovering these urban prototypes, these prototypical forms and units that make up the majority of Philadelphia. In this one project, Philly is famous for its Trinity structures, these Father, Son, and Holy Ghost houses. This is one of those trinities that we then kind of pull away and begin. This is how it's typically dealt with in a row. The trinity has turned into the row with extensions on the back over time and so forth. Well, we said, let's work with, from a contextual perspective. We don't believe in this kind of superficial sense of making things fit, but more fundamentally from an urban kind of planning and typological perspective, let's look at the fabric of the city. So we kind of pulled this out of its own context and created this kind of free-floating trinity that then made up this community of that we call Rag Flats, because it was an old rag factory, which was really our first kind of foray into sustainable building. My brother Patrick is the one that brought all of this to the front by saying, I want to generate power on this. And then he got himself to be a licensed solar panel installer. And then he said, I want to save water, I want to collect all the water. And then he figured a way of collecting all of the water. And then he said, I want to heat and cool these buildings in a different way. And so we've never done anything other than radiant heat in these units, because it only, in all of our projects, because it makes sense to heat surfaces rather than space, rather than volumes of air. So this is one of our first projects that kind of really demonstrates that attitude about the city. Just very quickly, the sky and the earth are great inspiration. Very simply, we can generate a lot of heat and power from the sun. We can store it in the ground. We can disperse heat into the ground in various ways. We can collect anything that falls on our sites. Urban environments are naturally sustainable, so that means try to manage everything on site. Well, that's what we try to do with all of our projects. This is another contextual project in the sense that we've always been fascinated by the row home, and this is a series of rows within a series of duplexes within a series of rows that we call thin flats that take, again, the same fundamental building block of the city of Philadelphia, the row home, and kind of reconfigure, reinterpret it, create what we call living rooms on the roof, because open space is a commodity in urban environments. Green roofs are a kind of given for us now. So those are kind of just some basic introduction into how we approach the environments in which we work.
I'd like just to say that sustainability is not about who has all the gadgets and who actually has the most clever house. Sustainability relies on the best and highest use of every single resource a project has. So in that regard, you have to really look for solutions that are multi-purpose. It's the only way you can actually maximize investment. So every square inch of a site that you have should be a productive site at the end of the day. So that's one of the things that inspire us to actually look at this very tight, very limited in resources, seemingly so, because it isn't in reality when you see all the ideas that can be generated from what appears to be at first glance a very small budget. And I think that what you're seeing here is sort of an approach to really maximize that opportunities on the site.
Again, context for us begins with the urban kind of form of the neighborhood. And so very quickly in 1911, you look at just a quick glance, you see density here. You see that buildings front the street generally. The previous lectures talked about that relationship to the street. Rick, for instance, they fill the site from edge to edge. There's a density that's important to the very concept of sustainability. Today, if you go back and forth, you begin to look at the same sites that, for instance, we forget about density. We start to take up 2 sites. We start to pull buildings back from the street. But what we felt was important from a relational perspective, a contextual perspective, is to just deal with those fundamental givens of the context. Again, we were asked that when we presented the project a couple of weeks ago, what's your approach? What can you say about context? And the only thing I said was, well, the context is diverse. So, in many ways, you could say anything goes. But I think it's more important that we open that up a little bit. As far as I'm concerned, it's one thing to talk about materials, form, pitched roofs, scale. But it's another thing to begin to look at the things that really make the neighborhood a neighborhood, and its relationship, again, the building's relationship to streets, porches, diversity in materials, diversity in form. Again, this is all about community as far as I'm concerned. This is about people being connected to a street and a conversation and a passerby. This is, I don't even know what this place is, but I remember seeing it and I thought, it's a mini steel mill or something. I mean, it's also a diversity in typologies as well. And and this is somewhat unfortunate, and please, I hope I'm not upsetting anybody here, but this is what really this is what happens when we lose the fundamental kind of understanding of context, because while from an aesthetic perspective, this looks as if it fits, it really doesn't fit in some important ways. So that's one of the things that we took on immediately with the site. Very simply, we said we will, and I'll have Jose take it from here after I talk just generally about the plan. We just said let's put our building in relation to the street, just like the other homes. Let's maximize its position east and west, and let's consciously let's make this a square so that it's non-directional, so that it has the ability to be repositioned and reconfigured in different sites and different contexts, but take on a different character. And let's make it incredibly flexible. I love the images of, I love your description of flexibility in the last project, and it's very similar to ours. But the gist of it is it's an open floor plan with a kitchen, living entry here, a secondary entry here, bathroom, mechanical core here, double, triple height space here with 2 bedrooms, and then a loft up inside the building. See,
if you recall, go back just 1 second. If you recall the the two maps that we showed you before, you see that the earlier 1911 map had a lot more density. It also had the possibility of having houses in the back of these lots. You know, we have a 100-foot plus deep lot, and there were two questions for us. You know, if we have to keep to that pattern, you know, how do we make the street livable and alive? And if we don't have to keep that, if we keep that pattern, which means that most of the site is open, how do we maximize the performance of that site? And if not, can we actually place another building? Because what we want to do is increase density. The solution of the problems of the 21st century are in the cities and nowhere else. I think that's something that we all know about and we know it very well. So what does it mean for us? It meant, it meant that, you know, we will fit the house here just far enough that we can actually get something very important, a handicap access to this building that is elevated 18 inches for environmental reasons, to deal with climate conditions, to deal with the volumes of snow. So in the front of that building, we have what? We have a productive landscape in the form of rain gardens. It's rain garden that actually captures all the water that falls in the front of the house and uses it as a resource. The back side of the building, which in this case faces south, it opens to the sun. It opens to the sun, it uses that energy to the extent possible. The building, as you will see, takes care of the solar orientation and has something to do with the pitches of the roof, which is actually a vernacular adaptation to a very specific bioclimatic condition of this region. But here, what we're proposing is that we will capture every single drop of water that falls on the site. We store it for reuse on the site. And in addition to that, we can actually take the wastewater from the site and actually process it in the back side of the building in a form of constructed wetlands, which is simply the way, years past, human beings dealt with waste, which is in nature a resource for other species. So what we're doing here is taking water that is quote-unquote waste water, and we're using it to support a series of plants that actually provide oxygen and provide beauty and provide all kinds of environmental services, and actually take that water away from the overtaxed CSO, combined sewer system of the city of Syracuse, which is eminently replicable throughout many of the all urban areas in the United States.
Just to quickly run through the next set of slides. This just demonstrates in a similar way as the last project the flexibility and the ease of that was also very important for us. How does this transform? How does this dwelling transform over time from an 1,100 square foot? We went with the absolute minimum 1,100 square foot unit up to a 1,363 foot dwelling with ease. It can become a 2-bedroom, handicap accessible by building this one wall, ground floor bedroom. It can become a 4-bedroom by building that one wall and filling in that triple height space, and so forth and so on. So, and then lastly, you'll see we build into the project the foundation for this addition that can be built over time that is accessed from the landing of the state. This is a very important dimension of our project. Just quickly, all heating and cooling, all heating and hot water is provided through, again, evacuated solar tube panels going into a small tank and a very high efficient boiler with radiant heat. This is the constructed wetland that Jose spoke of. We are understanding this building as a building with a skin, and that skin, literally, this is a rain screen system where the skin of the building is pulled away from the waterproof membrane of the system, and that skin, as you'll see, can be changed out over time. But what was really critical for us was this. We looked at not just how you build this, but why you build this, and what are the varying values of building one way versus another way. For instance, in stick framing, the cost of construction, relative between stick, modular, and SIP panels, it's probably one of the least expensive ways of building. One of the most expensive ways of building is with SIP panel construction, and what do you get out of it? But I think, and I won't talk about all of them except for this one. This is the one that really turned it for us. It was really about the sustainability of the community. It was really about how does one support the local community, and that's why we said this project will be budgeted and built in a totally conventional manner with 2x6 construction, and actually totally conventional insulation values as well. With the energy modeling that we've done, we actually have and the LEED certification checklist that we've done, we've invented a new, it's like LEED titanium or something. It's 15 points over LEED platinum. So it's actually overkill for this particular building in this particular context to be doing anything other than this, specifically because this is the only one that really supports the local community quickly through that. So again, the form of the building not only supports the solar panels here on the south, but it also creates a solar chimney for the building to eliminate all cooling in the summer. This is it in the winter. This is it in 5-10 years with the addition on the back, the constructed wetlands. That's the concept of the constructed wetland with affluent moving through here and becoming potable at the end.
We're thinking of using recycled granite curbing, which abound in the city of Syracuse, to use this. And this is a project that we completed as I mean, this is just to demonstrate that this is doable, eminently doable. And it is built in Washington, D.C., and yes, it is LEED platinum, and yes, the Obama girls go there as well. So, yes, we can, and yes, we did it.
And I'll just go through these last images quickly. So this is about how you can change your coat depending on the context or the client. So thank you, and I think we're buying a building in Syracuse. We're moving there.
Thank you for your patience and interest. I think because of time, we're going to ask the designers to please come to the front, and we're just going to take questions from the audience. I think you've heard plenty from us, so we'll just start the questions, okay? So, Jared and Rick, Pam. Is this not working?
It should be. It was.
How are we doing this with questions? Does this work?
Just take 5 questions.
Okay. Okay. We'll probably take like 5 questions and then we'll move downstairs to the reception and you can, I don't know, do you hear me? Okay. And then we can continue the questioning down there. So, how are we doing this? Just stand up and project.
Oh, I can. I've got one question which is kind of essential for design and performance, which is the actual form of the village. And when I look at so I just said it seems there is one very important aspect to both design and performance, and that was addressed in very different ways. And the thing I'm aiming at is surface to volume ratio and the compact character of the building, and how that is related to your design approach, at the same time how it impacts the building performance. And it strikes me that we look at pretty different proposals there, and I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, I can comment on that. That was one of the earliest things that we talked about when we met, really even before the design was developed, with David White from TransSolar, who is a consultant. And put it a little closer, sorry. So David White, who's an associate in the New York office of TransSolar, worked with us very closely from the very beginning. At the same time, we were presenting to ourselves images of the context and analysis of some of the same things that were talked about by others, the quality of the neighborhood. He was telling us, look at the the ratio between the exterior envelope and the surface area and the amount of enclosed space. So we, on our project, were very conscious of what could be potentially an optimal relationship between that exterior envelope and the amount of space you were enclosing relative to the path to, knowing from day one that we were trying to meet the passive house standard.
Also, just quickly, that the contextual photographs are very duplicitous because in the idealized urban condition, there's a lot of very shallow side lots. And so right now, what you're seeing as a contextual response is a lot of the houses are really long because people have added on to them, and they're 6-bedroom rentals and 7-bedroom rentals, and there's this kind of crazy contextual, sort of happening. And so the scale of and proportion of the house on the front really took primacy for us, and then creating the most compact volume in plan, sort of from front yard to rear yard, is how we sort of addressed contextual building scale relative to building envelope performance.
For us, we didn't think of it in and of itself. Performance and surface, volume. We thought of it because it's all those things. It's basically all those things. For instance, we wanted to touch the ground with as little surface as possible, and so that just naturally pushed this vertically. But that did other things for us. It got us above the level of where the tree is in the back that would cast the shadow that would give us the height that we need, because if you're not that high, you do lose a lot with the shadow of the tree. But it also, in making that plan and that volume that compact, it opened up this other issue of that is important to us, which is density on an urban scale, because it allowed for more buildings to be built within a smaller distance from each other. So they're all related.
For us, we thought about it, and we were thinking about this very simple to reduce the volume. So early on in the competition, you have to decide, is it a 1-story, is it 2-story, is it 3-story? So when we were thinking about volume, form, and flexibility, we made the very simple 2 with the non-gable and the non-pitched roof, partly to reduce the volume of the project, create the largest volume interior space with the smallest perimeter, and then allow flexibility inside that, all the way from 4-bedroom, 4 students to the open work loft and everything in between. And by making the flat roof, it also opened up a possibility for something that we're really interested in, this concept of biophilia, is a green roof. So we have a green pack green roof system. By having a predominantly flat roof over that volume, it allowed us to capture the stormwater and plant a green roof and kind of re-knit that little bit of ecosystem. So the volume was actually a very important issue to us, and it's one of the things that drove the very simple box-like quality of the proposal.
I guess I'll build on the question that Michael just asked and perhaps make it more general. When I first went and looked at all 7, at first I was looking for the kind of information that would allow a performative comparison. Clearly, as an aesthetic comparison, there are individual languages developed from one firm to another, one sense and context, but I was almost looking for that baseline which allows this whole form performance conversation to happen. Like, okay, well, what's the watts per square foot for some house? 2 boards listed it. What's the compactness ratio? What's the fenestration percentage? And what percent of it is south-facing? And I'm just curious what's your take as competitors who obviously want to put forward a scheme that wins, versus the notion of also wanting the best ones to be built and, in a sense, happily subscribe to saying, well, we did a 1-story house which has half the compactness ratio of the neighbor, but we did it for a reason, because it's also a workplace and might need ground floor access. So what's your sense of having to compete in this new form plus performance model, where it might be best for all parties in the conversation to at least say, here's where it's strong and here's where it's weak? Automotive manufacturers have to say how fast it accelerates. Real estate manufacturers have to say it's a 2.5 bath.
Yeah, I can answer.
Some numbers, you don't need to lie about them. It's just better that we all compare them, not lie, not address them, which is more what I meant to say.
One thing that you may not realize, and I know I can speak for ourselves saying this, we had to submit a technical submission along with the boards, so it might actually be helpful if those get put out, a copy of them or something, so people can reference them. In our case, we actually have the modeling identified in that and listed, and so I don't think you're ever going to get an apples-to-apples comparison for precisely the reasons that you stated. but there is more information available than what you see on the boards, and as well as the cost estimate and other things. So to the extent that the organizers feel comfortable, making that available, that might answer some of your questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to take one more question, and then we'll invite everyone downstairs to the reception. Can you, want me to pass this?
I've got a quick question. I really enjoy seeing all of those presentations and various technologies and all. But the one issue that I didn't see is there's a place for a vehicle to be put on the site. There was no garage, there was no driveway, it was all pedestrian lane, which was great. In this climate, when you've got all of these vehicles on the street, you've got to get them off the street because of the snow. Where do the cars go? It's such a site for so narrow.
Well, let me just say, first of all, it was one of the first questions we all asked, and it was stated in the competition brief that we were not to consider a car for this project, and we could just leave it at that. But I think the issue is larger.
No, I think just to do a little retread, I think we were trying to use the model of older urban neighborhoods that would either use driveways or would begin to park on the street.
Right.
And that when snow removal was an issue, we would do what most cities do, and that's alternate side of the street parking regulations. So not rocket science. Cities have been doing it for.
And I think, but I think the larger picture that introduces is about thinking about what's important, about relatively speaking what's important, because that was the challenge of this at every level. This much percentage of glass to this much percentage of wall to this much percentage of light, car, not car. So what that does is it encourages a different way of thinking about the car and its significance to the home, and it just returns to to older neighborhood. It returns to more pedestrian oriented way of thinking about sites. That was my interpretation.
Yeah, it may even help us to have a little bit of public transportation.
I think it's just part of, it's sort of old new thinking about adaptive reuse for green thoughts about urban development and redevelopment, and how this quality of life, or specifically Rick's proposal, for example, which is about living and working in the same place, and whether the 2-vehicle per family paradigm is the paradigm going forward, or whether it's other modes of transportation, public transportation, and how you're achieving different sensibilities about living green. This is talking about qualities of life and thinking about broader sensibilities about sustainability, which are that some of the things that you may be used to may not be the model going forward. So it's more progressive thinking about urban living.
I also think that there is something imminent upon us, which is the shifting from an oil-based economy to a carbon-based economy. When carbon sequestration and carbon emissions have a value, you will think very different about how you use the land and the performance that you can obtain about a driveway or not.
So Rick, final word.
Sure, I agree with everyone up here about the issues about mass transit where we're headed, but for me it was actually a really simple thing, that the street is really profoundly important, and people need to be invested in the street. And one of the things that's happened in the near west side, when those driveways become really important, the driveway in the car becomes really important. When the car is in the street becomes really important, because if you have one, it's an important asset and you're keeping your eye on it. And this whole Jane Jacobs eyes on the street thing. So I know in our proposal, the front porch and orientation out towards the street was, if you were a car owner, you'd be interested in how it was doing out in front. And that street space was part of your owned neighborhood. And so I also think we're going to be diminishing the use on the single car, the 2-car family. But for us, it was really a design thing. The street's really, really important. If you put a really important thing in the street, people are going to be even more focused in on it. If you run a driveway through the property and park the car in the back, you're going to focus your attention more on the basketball hoop in the driveway in the back and less on the street. And we think the near west side, its real beauty and its heart and soul is the streets. And anything we can do to emphasize the street as a critically important, precious thing is good. So that was my 2 cents worth.
Well, thank you to our team for your presentation. We look forward to working with you. We want to thank our sponsors and co-sponsors and thank the audience. So join us downstairs and please stay tuned to the new website.
Yeah, really.